Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. I'm myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War news update. First part thereof for the 15th of October 2025. I'm pretty jaded today. I was up till 2 o'clock last night for a 3-hour live stream chewing the cud with my friend Gareth. I'll put the link to that if you have some time on your hands today in the description below. We were talking about everything geopolitical in the world that we possibly could fit into that time. So a constant stream of my thoughts there. Anyway, let's get on with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before all the usual caveats apply, of course, to those stats. 1,070 personnel lost, so that's another day above 1,000 again, good for the Ukrainians. 3 tanks and 2 troop carrying AFVs, fairly typically low, but 43 artillery systems, that's definitely a big uptick there. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, that's good news. Don't know what they are. I haven't seen any footage that indicates anti-aircraft warfare systems over the last 24 hours, but I'll keep my eyes peeled. And 141 vehicles and fuel tanks, that is a pretty darned high number there, comparatively speaking, for recent times. So that, I think, signifies that it's been pretty active on the front lines. We'll talk about material in a second, but it's worth noting that Andrew Perpetua here on a thread yesterday said the number of dead Russians I've counted in the past few days. So remember, he counts up, although he's not been releasing the material losses recently, and I don't know why, but in surveying the videos that he does on a daily basis, he also tots up Russian losses, manpower losses, and by that I mean like fully dead. Like there is a drone that's dropped an ID on this guy and he is not alive anymore. And the numbers he is looking at, I think, show us something. So we have October the 9th, 267. Really high losses there, considering last time I looked at the average, it was somewhere around 100 a day, I think. So these numbers are fairly high. 267 on the 9th, on the 10th, 151, then 140, then 97, then 170. So I think these are high numbers. Interesting that vehicle losses, Ukrainian and Russian, the 9th, 292. So there's a spike on that 9th. Something big happened on the 8th, one would have thought. October the 10th, 225 vehicles, 137, 192, and then 288 on the 13th. Really heavy there. Total drones used, October the 9th, and this is the big spike, that correlates with the heavy personnel losses and heavy vehicle losses. The drones used on October the 9th, Ukraine 932 drones used, 932 bits of footage, I guess then. 479 Russian ones used. So you're looking at pretty much double the ratio, 2-to-1 ratio of Ukrainian to Russian drones. And of course, drones being the major cause of loss in terms of both personnel and equipment, this is very significant. So you expect twice as many losses, although depends whether there's a selection, whether there's some kind of skew in the data that the Russians tend towards blowing up more of these things or try and hit more of those things rather than the Ukrainians hitting these things and those things. So who knows whether it's a strict 2-to-1 equipment or personnel ratio. But nonetheless, you get the point here. On October the 10th, it was 512 drones to Russia's 397. Then the next day, 335 to 327. So pretty much parity there. And then October the 12th, 326 Ukrainian drones to 362 Russian drones. So then the Russians use more. And then the 13th, Russians use more as well, 545 to 549. So that's ratio on the 9th, which was hugely in favor of the Ukrainians, has been closed. So I don't know what this particularly tells you. I'd have to think about these numbers, but certainly heavy losses there do correlate to that first day of huge drone usage. Right. quite a bit going on in Pokrovsk. Here we have Euromaidan Press talking about reporting from Ukraine, the YouTube channel's video. They do a daily synopsis of one of the reporting from Ukraine's videos. They say here, Ukrainian drones eliminate troops faster than Russian can replace them near Pokrovsk. What devastated Russia's western offensive is now systematically deployed eastward of Pokrovsk. I'm not sure the English is right there. 12-kilometer drone kill zones where every vehicle, motorcycle and soldier faces immediate destruction. This is something General Sursky was talking about, the commander-in-chief, yesterday, saying the kill zones of drones has now expanded. That corridor has expanded to be sort of 10 kilometers to 12 kilometers, something like that. So, and I presume that's both ways as well. So the strategy has already proven devastating. 47 armoured vehicles destroyed just across 1 kilometre of road. So they say Russian forces have abandoned mechanized assaults entirely, resorting to small infantry teams crawling through fields at night. Yet 9 in 10 infiltration groups never reach their targets alive. So this is in the Pokrovsk area particularly, although we have then seen those massive attacks that took place the other day. More on them in a second. Commander Robert Brovdy, Kostyantynivka, oversees the eastern sector, operating on brutal mathematics. Ukrainian drones must eliminate Russian soldiers faster than Moscow can mobilize replacements. Absolutely. What began as precision strikes on supply trucks that evolved into total air dominance, where fuel and ammunition never touched the front, leaving the Russian commanders unable to sustain any semblance of coordinated attack. Now, of course, then we look at Andrew Perpetua's losses and drone use, and we can see that actually, at least according to Andrew and his team, last few days have seen the Russians match the Ukrainian drone use there. So, take all of the claims here on both accounts there, but whether it be reporting from Ukraine, Euromaidan Press, or Andrew Perpetua, take it all with a pinch of salt, of course. Now, before we continue in the Pokrovsk area, I'm just going to go up north to Sumy, where you've had those 3 settlements where the Russians have been pushed back towards the border, and the one most easterly, called Oleksivka, has seen you've got Kostyantynivka, and then you've got the other one, and then you've got Oleksivka here, Andriivka, I think it is, and then Oleksivka here. This is now half, I think, in control of the Ukrainians. They're pushing the Russians back. This is from a Russian channel. We wrote that there were counterattacks in Oleksivka, so that's what they call it, but everything there is coming to its logical conclusion. The Ukrainian armed forces are already in the center of the settlement. The southern part is below them. Ours are trying to bring in additional reserves, most of which are being worn out even as they approach. Oleksivka will have to be abandoned. The only question is, how many more hundreds of fighters will the command be prepared to kill with its stupid orders to send a notice to relatives that your son, husband, brother is missing in action? But even without the Ukrainians, disorganization can still be seen in the same friendly fire. So, even without Ukrainians killing us, we're still killing each other through friendly fire. Well, let's wait a couple more days until a decision is made about the obvious. So it's not looking good there for the Russians. That's one of the few areas of definite success for the Ukrainians across the front. Here we have no reports referring to a video. It's drone footage here. Have I seen this using RPG warheads dropped as bombs effectively? I've not seen that before. I've seen them used as the munition that gets triggered as you fly into a piece of kit as an FPV drone, but I've not seen drone drop munition, Mavic type drones dropping RPG warheads that have been reconstituted into bombs. Anyway, according to the General Staff, Ukrainian assault units advanced up to 1.6 kilometers in certain areas over the past day. That's Pokrovsk area, clearing and securing 3.4 square kilometers of territory in Pokrovsk district. Now, Pokrovsk is a little bit all over the shop. You've got the Ukrainians, I think, moving again into Mayak. At the same time, the Russians are making some gains literally just below there. So it's like one side pushes and the other side also pushes, but somewhere else. And it's just constantly moving. So, this Bunny Ears sector was one that you thought might have been cleared up by the Ukrainians relatively quickly, but they're still poised to wipe out the Russians, but not actually doing it. And this probably signifies that they are unable to do it effectively. Like, they just don't have the forces to properly clear up this area. That's the Ukrainians I'm talking about. The kind of you would if you could, you answer you can't. That area would have been cleared out if they could have cleared it out. It's not like they're waiting for some kind of magic moment or something. Anyway, there is some good news in terms of the number of bits of kit that the Ukrainians have taken out there. Repulsion of yesterday's large-scale Russian mechanized assault in the Pokrovsk sector, says Special Kherson Cat, showing more footage of these vehicles that were attacking in the Mechanized and Pokrovsk areas. It's also happened in Kostyantynivka, just up the road as well. Lots of video footage now coming out of these vehicles getting taken out. Here we have new footage from Ukraine's 33rd Mechanized Brigade showing Russian armor assaulting the left flank of Shakova in the Dobropilya salient. The attack was repelled, but the ease with which Russian vehicles crossed a supposed anti-tank ditch does raise concerns there. And I don't know if that's I can forward wind this. Forward wind, it's not VHS tape. Don't know if we've got that easily viewable here. I mean, there's lots of destroyed equipment here, but they are getting to places that they really shouldn't, and negotiating anti-tank ditches in order to get there. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure where on that video that is. Anyway, you can watch these all to your heart's content at your own leisure, as they're linked in the description below. Now, some of this footage that you're seeing, so we have, I think this is different units footage, we have a destroyed Russian column of armoured vehicles in the Pokrovsk region. So here you can see, and some of it's still smoking, so this is recent, or at least some of it is recent. You have a destruction of quite a large number of Russian vehicles. They really did get a hammering here, but as mentioned, they were able to get over anti-tank ditches. They were able to drop troops off, even though 50% of the vehicles got initially hammered. 50% managed to succeed in depositing their troops, although it is claimed that they were all taken out. Here, Euromaidan Press reports that Russia lost at least 20 tanks and armoured vehicles in a single assault near Pokrovsk on the 9th of October. We're on the 15th now, so 6 days ago. And that 9th of October is, so let's go back to Andrew's numbers. 9th of October, Ukraine 932 drones. So that signifies not so much the Ukrainians attacking, like we're going to go and take out lots of Russian things. That signifies the Russians attacking and the Ukrainians reacting really well by piling an absolute ton of drones, piling them onto those attacking columns. And that's why you have on the 9th 267 troops that he saw, that Andrew Perpetua saw, die on video footage, because that was when the Russians were attacking. Russia lost at least 20 tanks and armoured vehicles in that single assault in Pokrovsk on the 9th, including its newest T-90M and T-80BVM models. Russian factories produced maybe 10 new T-90Ms this entire year. I reported that the other day. They're hoping to ramp up production after 2026, but to produce 10 in a year is not impressive. They can't replace what's burning in hours. So there's been quite a bit of talk about these attacks that just took place, depleting more vehicles in 72 hours than the Russians make in a year type thing. 2 Russian armoured columns hit Shakova and Mechanized this week, says Euromaidan Press in another post. At least 33 vehicles were destroyed over those 2 attacks. The goal, widen the Dobropilya salient base so supply convoys can reach Russian troops inside. Right now, Ukrainian forces in Shakova can hit anything in that corridor. So it's about widening the base, because if you have a very thin base to a salient, then the enemy can just attack the route into that salient and you just can't supply. This is what happened in Kursk, where the Ukrainians really needed to massively widen the area where they attacked into, so that there wasn't just, say, one road that was feeding the entire sector, and all the Russians needed to do was make that road a road of death so the Ukrainians couldn't supply their own forces. That's why they're trying to get all that area below the same river in and around Klushkovo and so on and so forth. Yeah, all that kind of area. Novi Put, that was it. But they failed, unfortunately, to establish a foothold there. And as a result, the Russians were able to close down the entire Kursk sector because it wasn't wide enough. So the Russians here trying to make their, I guess, bunny ears area supplyable by widening the base of it and not having it cut off and move to reconnect, etc., etc. We have another video here from the Euromaidan press again, sharing a different unit. This is now going to the Zaporizhia sector, where Ukraine continues to hunt Russian air defense assets. Drone pilots from Ukraine's 472nd Luftwaffe Battalion struck a Russian P-18 Terek mobile radar in Zaporizhia sector. I do wonder, if you go back to the losses here, whether something like a P-18 radar is an anti-aircraft system component, or whether that's a special equipment component, or what. You know, sometimes you wonder what category exactly these things go under, but that's one of these larger radar array sort of things, and there you can see it. That is going to be very, very useful for the Ukrainians to have taken out. What else? So footage of this came out yesterday. This is a UGV, an unmanned ground vehicle used by the Ukrainians with a machine gun, apparently even in combat with actual Russian infantry and taking out one of the troops. A Ukrainian unmanned ground drone armed with a machine gun opens fire at close range, eliminating at least one Russian soldier near Kostyantynivka, Donetsk Oblast. Despite enemy FPV drones and artillery, the robotic vehicle returns safely to Ukrainian troops. It does suffer some near hits there, but apparently survives. And you know, this is what we are going to see more and more, which is drones used, UGVs used in all sorts of different capacities, whether it be medevac, get your injured troops out, get supplies in, or lay mines, or in this case, be used offensively as a mobile remote machine gun platform, indeed taking out a Russian soldier there. So, Deputy Commander of the 412th Nemesis Regiment, Pavlo Latyonov, says modern bombers, so these are obviously not planes, but drone bombers, now strike 50 to 60 kilometers out. They carry dozens of kilos and can deliver supplies, lay mines, scout, and even test medevac. So they've even tested these being medevacs. Now, I talked ages ago, what was it called? It's not the Martler, it was called it's a British provided drone right near the beginning of the war that it was strong enough to carry an injured body. It could lift a body up and fly away. And I think that was given to the Ukrainians, or was being developed with the Ukrainians in mind. But the Ukrainians all have developed their own versions of that by now. But evidently they are using all sorts of drones, and we're not going to be seeing all the footage of some of these drones being used because there'll be quite a lot of OBSEC surrounding them if they are cutting edge drones or prototypes being used effectively or even not effectively. The testing of them will be done, and we may eventually see some footage, but often it's like, for example, AI swarms are being tested by the Ukrainians and probably by the Russians as well. But we know the Ukrainians have used these a number of times. They've controlled. I think they can control up to 100. They have routinely tested up to 25, I believe, and we've not seen any footage of that because they'll be keeping stum with regard to that kind of technology. Now, the Ukrainians need all the help they can get, and help came yesterday in the form of a truck carrying Russian guards in Dagestan crashing. I think there were 2 dead and a whole bunch injured as a truck crashed with another vehicle and toppled over. So that happened in Dagestan. And speaking of drones, I just thought I'd add this one in. Quite often I'm like, yeah, British are doing a good job, because I think genuinely we are sort of punching above our weight to some degree. It's interesting listening to Dmytro Kuleba the other day speak on the rest is politics. They asked him, which of the nations that have done a really good job, and one of the first he said was the Netherlands. So you'd be happy to hear that if you're Dutch. He said that the Dutch, after MH17, which had a load of Dutch passengers on, was shot down, they didn't really, at the time, react hugely. They'd never been like a massive support of Ukraine. And then the war started, and actually they did a load of work to convince Germany to do stuff. He's talking, it was quite revealing what he was saying, that the Netherlands have been like massive supporters. And because he was asked who surprised you, and he's like, the Netherlands really come up with the goods, consistently been supportive of Ukraine, and that's really good. And I do think that's the case. Like at the beginning, they were giving tanks, they were giving kit that they didn't even have. Getting kit for Ukraine. The Netherlands were really punching above their weight, I think, early in the war, and Kuleba really recognised that. And obviously talking about UK with Boris Johnson, but the UK have been at the forefront of giving a whole bunch of stuff on a number of different occasions. New tech, well, not new, but categorically different equipment. Like they're the first to give the modern main battle tanks and the Storm Shadow missiles, etc., etc. And I talk often about how there are British personnel in Ukraine way more than you'd think, and they're doing stuff all the time, and it's not, it's not public knowledge type thing. Here, Tim White talks about on an important day in Brussels. So there's a NATO meeting in Brussels. It's rather like Ramstein, and even Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War for the US, is there in Brussels. But they're all meeting to talk about Ukraine. Here, speaking of drones, on an important day in Brussels, the UK's Defence Minister will announce more than 85,000 drones have been delivered to Ukraine by Britain in the last 6 months alone, ahead of expectations and due to increased production. So we heard the other day that we are 5 months ahead of schedule. We've got a load of missiles to Ukraine, and now we're hearing 85,000 drones. So going, and they're ahead of schedule as well. So I really do think, I don't want to be all pro the present government and whatnot. They're getting a hard time for a lot of things, but actually our support for Ukraine is resolute, and we are working really hard to help Ukraine, as we were under the previous government too. But just so I'd add that one in there. Okay, let's go to what happened overnight in terms of distance strikes. 113 Russian drones in Ukrainian airspace, 86 of which were taken down. So that's 27 again. 27 seems to be the magic number of drones getting through. And that on a consistent basis is hellish. 27 drones that pack the punch that these drones do, getting through, striking, in this case, in 11 different locations. That is a problem. Although the interception rate is okay, that is a problem. Now, I want to just help to visualize the problem here. Here is the size of a Shahed against a human. And this is the size of the Wild Hornets interceptor that is doing a really good job of taking these down. The Sting interceptor, the design of which has been copied quite a bit by all sorts of international interceptor drone manufacturers. A scale comparison: Shahed drone, Sting, anti-Shahed drone, and human. To date, Sting, developed by Wild Hornets, has intercepted over 600 Russian aerial targets. I wonder what the range of things they've taken out is. I assume like Shaheds, Gerberas, and reconnaissance drones. I wonder if anything else. I wonder if they've got any ability to take out, for example, a cruise missile. Don't think they'd be fast enough, but could they intercept one? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, that's a Shahed, and the size, I think it's important to understand the size. And Radoslav Sikorski, the Polish foreign minister, has essentially said, well, it's important to communicate the size of these bad boys. So Poland's foreign minister Sikorski displayed a full-size Shahed drone in the British Parliament. A drone won't reach London, he said, but a fleet of scrap metal can destroy critical infrastructure. So everyone really is focusing, say, in NATO or in any country around the world now that's strategizing for war going forward and trying to future-proof their country. They are going to be thinking about, well, how do we deal with these things? How do we deal with drones? FPV drones, reconnaissance drones, Shahed drones, MQ-9 Reaper drones. Like, what is our policy? What's our strategy there? Right, 7 Ukrainian regions experienced emergency power outages after Russian drones struck energy facilities overnight. So I presume more energy facilities were struck. The Russians are not giving up on their relentless assaults on Ukraine's energy infrastructure ahead of what is likely to be a very cold winter by all accounts. Russia systematically targets power infrastructure to deprive Ukrainians of electricity and heating during cold months, attempting to break civilian morale. The Ministry of Energy later reported that emergency outages were lifted in all Ukrainian regions by the afternoon. So that's obviously that's 2 nights ago then. Sorry, that's not from last night. It's from out. Okay, no, it's afternoon there now. Actually, 50 minutes ago. That was so. Actually, that is from today then. Yeah. Just had a slight time brain fart there. This morning, Ukrainian drones. So that I have no footage really other than this emergency services footage, which isn't too revealing, of any strikes last night in Ukraine. I'm sure, like I said to you before, I'm sure that's like a bad thing. If you don't see footage coming out from Ukraine, then you can probably assume that the Russians have hit sensitive targets, either critical military infrastructure or military industrial complex infrastructure or civilian energy infrastructure that they don't like to publicize on the socials, on the news. Going on to Ukrainian strikes, they seem to have had a little bit of success last night. It's been not hit and miss, but I was expecting last week. Essentially, we have seen some really impressive hits in Crimea, but beyond Crimea, it's been a lot quieter in the last week than it has been otherwise. And I was wondering to myself last night whether, say, for example, the US had a word to Ukraine and said, look, can you stop hitting refineries because this is going to affect the price of oil or this or that or whatever. And maybe Ukraine has dialed it back a bit because that had happened previously, and they dialed back on striking oil refineries when they were previously having this purple patch of doing so. And you had a whole quiet time during negotiations, and then once negotiation period kind of, well, nothing really materialized after Alaska, Ukraine started just going, right, sod that. We don't need to be careful anymore. It's not worked. We're going to batter the crap out of Russia's energy infrastructure. And then that has been dialed back over the last couple of weeks. And I think because drone and missile production has been hit, that's my working hypothesis at the moment. And I keep saying that, but I have a sense that drone and missile production has probably been stymied a little bit by successful Russian attacks. Nonetheless, they are still making stuff and they are still striking. And last night, they appeared to have struck a couple of oil facilities again. So this morning, Ukrainian drones struck the Bashneft Ufaneftekim oil refinery in Ufa once again. This is Bashkortostan. Smoke is visible from afar and damage assessment is currently underway. So we don't really know what's gone on there. Just some distant, fairly heavy smoke coming out from a refinery. And indeed, there were drones that were caught on camera in the daylight heading towards that facility. 1,400 kilometers from the front line, Bashneft in Ufa, the oil refinery complex there, was targeted. Bashneft has a total capacity of around 23 to 26 million tons per year. It's a complex of 3 oil refineries. The Ufimsky refinery, which is 7.5 million tons. The Ufaneftekim, 9.5 million, which is one that was suggested in the last post, and Novoil of 7.1 million tons. So during the previous attack there on the 11th, the AVT-5 unit was hit on the territory of the Novoil. So one of the 3 was hit previously, and possibly a second one of the 3 was hit last night. A refinery in Volgograd's Krasnoarmeyski district was attacked last night as well, according to local residents there. Again, battle damage assessment is tough to come by. That's supposed to be responsible for 4.6% of Russia's total refining capacity, that one in Volgograd. Many of these have been hit previously, although there'll be different elements, like we saw in the last sort of post here, that there are 3 complexes, 3 oil refineries in that complex. But anyway, Then we have a little bit more information about a substation that was hit not last night but the night before. The 500 kilovolt Arzamas electrical substation was struck by Ukraine in the Nizhny Novgorod region. The key substation of the region transmits power to Russian railways, traction substations, Gazprom gas processing facilities, and 200,000 residents. So not just about, it was not really probably about the residents as much as it is about stopping gas processing and railways from working. I mean, that's a real haul for the Ukrainians in taking that particular substation out. And there are going to be tons of these substations around Russia that are clearly not going to be protected. There's no way you can have air defenses around this stuff. So Ukraine, it's such a massive country that Ukraine can be at their leisure just pick these targets. As long as they've got decent enough intelligence, they can pick these targets and pretty much assume that what if you do get your drones over that initial barrier, the air defense that will be sitting around the Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod and other oblasts that are close to Ukraine. Once you get over that corridor of air defense, you are probably going to be free to hit most of what you're going for. They'll choose, unless it's somewhere like Yelabuga. But we're going to come on to Yelabuga in a second, the place where they build the Shahed drones. Anyway, the AFU struck the oil depot in Feodosia again, as we know, a couple of nights ago. So that was hit initially, really impressive strike, and then it was hit a couple of nights ago, and my goodness, that thing was on fire. As you can see from this footage here, that image, huge fire that is basically hasn't particularly stopped. I don't know what it's like at the moment, but no report says it damaged 16 more fuel tanks in that strike that had survived the previous hit. So there were all those tanks that were still perfectly untouched from that first hit, and they seem to have knackered them. A large fire is ongoing, the General Staff reports. Additional targets that have been hit include a P-18 radar in the Krasna Polyana, Crimea area, and a drone command post in Oleshki, and an ammo depot near Makivka. So that P-18 on the list there. Okay. Then a bit more information about this incredible. I mean, that's such a striking photo, isn't it? It's almost apocalyptic in fields. Ukraine's General Staff confirmed a second attack this week on the Crimean fuel depot used for Russian military supply. So this is quite a key place to have hit by the sounds of it. Ukrainian forces damaged 16 fuel reservoirs at the marine oil terminal, says Euromodern Press, in occupied Feodosia on the night of the 13th, hitting storage units that had survived an early attack on the 6th. The facility serves as an important logistics link for supplying Russian troops with fuel and lubricants. The military command stated that defense forces are conducting strikes on military targets, weakening the offensive and military economic potential of the aggressor country. So that strike on Feodosia appears to have been very successful. Now, satellite imagery confirms that at least 6 fuel tanks were destroyed in the latest strike. So there were claims that 16. No reports later here now talks about there being 6 that were destroyed, with likely damage to 3 or 4 more due to the proximity to the fire zones. This second Ukrainian drone attack brings a total number of destroyed or damaged tanks at the site actually to at least 17. So there is that number of tanks that have been damaged there. That's huge. I mean, a couple of really successful strikes on Crimea, and it's looking like it's having an effect on the provision of refined products to Crimea. I'm pretty sure it's going to be connected in some way. Russia's refinery output, speaking of which, says Euromodern Press, won't fully recover before mid-2026. So, assuming Ukraine just give up doing anything now, stop attacking Russia and just let them rebuild, it would be mid-2026 before they could get their refinery output back on track. The Ukrainian drone strikes have slashed capacity very effectively, and that doesn't even include future hits of the ongoing campaign. So that's the point. So Ukraine aren't going to stop. So mid-2026 is your absolute best case scenario of getting production capacities back in line. But that's not going to happen. Thierry on one of my threads yesterday was saying, well, actually that thing that was hit, as according to the source that you used, that AVT 5 or AVT6 unit or whatever at this particular refinery. That's really important. He had the knowledge he had gained from somewhere to say that's the piece of refining equipment that everything else is contingent upon. It's part of this process, which is a necessary. I've talked about this before. Sometimes you get like parallel processes going on. So you blow this up and actually the refinery can still operate even if the capacity is taken down. But then there are going to be some strikes that take out such key elements of the processing journey of the oil there that the refinery just won't be able to operate at all. That actually, in order for there to be any output in this place, you need this unit. So Ukraine's drone strike, says Euromonitor Press again, hit the exact points that keep Russia's refineries alive, a new analysis shows. The top confirmed targets in August and September were AVT units, the first step in crude oil refining. Damaging just one can shut down an entire refinery. Now, it's going to change from refinery to refinery, but you can rest assured that the Ukrainians are going to be aiming for the particular places in these refineries that are the most sensitive. Speaking of which, I talked to Will Teal, the other week now, probably the other month, about strikes on Russian oil refineries. Because this has been happening a lot recently, again, and Feodosia's just gone up in flames. You've got more strikes happening consistently every week. I've reached out to him to talk to him again, and so we're just sorting out a time. He's now back in Australia, but look out for another chat where we talk refinery strikes. US permanent representative to NATO, this is a chap called Whitaker. He has announced that Washington will make an important announcement tomorrow, and this was said yesterday, so that means today. Might be Hegseth in NATO, in the NATO summit, will make an important announcement tomorrow regarding arms supplies to Ukraine. I wonder what that will be. Trump was just asked on last night in his typical rambling answer about the war in Ukraine and how it's all Biden's fault, and how he was sort of wistfully ruining Russia's missteps in the war. Like, oh, they should have won it within a week. Oh, they didn't. Oh, poor old Russia type thing. Just the way he speaks about Putin and Russia it makes my skin crawl. He should just be saying Putin's a murderous douchebag, and I dislike the man because he's morally bankrupt, and we're going to try and do everything we can to make sure that Ukraine prevails in this war, because that is what is good and that is what is right, and we do not want to reward aggression. We do not want to reward dictatorship. We do not want to reward autocracy in this world. But instead, he's like, oh, poor Poots. No, he lost. He didn't do very well at the beginning. What a shame. He should have won this war within a week. Oh, poor Poots. Like, come on, mate. Anyway, this is what he says about Tomahawks.
But it did. But it's not making Russia look good, I will tell you that.
We need Tomahawks in Ukraine?
We'll be talking about Ukraine, yeah. I mean, I have the president coming in on Friday, and I know what he has to say. He wants weapons. He would like to have Tomahawks. Everyone else wants Tomahawks. And we have a lot of Tomahawks. Tomahawk is
And he said this a couple of times now. He said this in another, I think, interview or presser, I think over the last 48 hours, where he's talked about having a lot of Tomahawks. Now, I reported yesterday that it's thought that they'd only received 20 to 50 Tomahawks. And that's probably true, because don't actually take on board what Trump is saying as being anything close to accurate or meaningful. Not in the way that he is trying to say it. Like, you would think he's saying we've got lots of Tomahawks. You say that because then the next sentence you say is, and so we're going to give a whole bunch to Ukraine. But actually, he might say we've got a whole load of Tomahawks, and it might be that the US has 4,150 Tomahawks. But actually, strategically, that's what they need if they're going to get involved in a war with, say, Russia or China. They're going to need a whole ton of Tomahawks. So saying you've got a whole ton of Tomahawks is kind of irrelevant, because it's not telling you how many excess Tomahawks you've got. And that's really what we want to know. But anyway, he says we've got a load of Tomahawks, so you might think that they're on the edge of giving a load to Ukraine.
Need any tomahawks in Argentina?
You can cross Moscow with tomahawk.
You need them for your opposition, I guess, because see, in this country, they'd use tomahawks for the opposition. I don't do that. I'm much nicer. The Democrats would use them if they had the chance. They're sick people. Go ahead. I don't know.
Just absolutely outrageous. He's suggesting that the political opposition would use tomahawks on the Republicans because they're sick. I think you do project too much there. Right, and I said I was going to talk about Yelabuga, but get a load of this, and this is 100% what I think. And I've told you this myself.
The number one.
This is retired American General Jack Keane, who often says good stuff on Fox News. He's a guy that gets wheeled onto Fox News quite a bit, but he's pretty decent in saying the right thing for the Fox News audience.
Their number one target will be the Yelabuga manufacturing center for Shahed missiles built by Ukraine. 20,000 North Koreans are there at that manufacturing center, Brett. It's out of the range of...
He misspoke a little bit. It's not Abaluga, and it's not built by Ukraine. What he means is a Yelabuga, or Alabuga, but not Abaluga, drone manufacturing facility, which absolutely needs to be hammered.
The Yelabuga manufacturing center for Shahed missiles built by
Drones.
Ukraine. 20,000 North Koreans are there at that manufacturing center, Brett. It's out of the range of everything they have right now. That'll be target one, but they'll all be military targets. Ukraine is not going to target civilian targets. And what Putin is trying to do with President Trump is the same thing he successfully did with Biden. Threaten escalation if you do X, and there'll be something to come against you as a result of it. And he won that bluff with Biden time and time again. I don't think he'll win it with President Trump.
That's what the Fox News listenership need to hear, which is like, I mean, I don't actually think that's true. I actually think it wasn't Putin that put the red lines down for Biden and for the West. It was us that did it. I actually think it's almost worse because we created those red lines. But I like the idea of like, well, Biden was weak in giving stuff to Ukraine that they needed. I don't think Trump is going to do that, and that's a message we want Trump to hear, actually, which is like, if you don't give tomahawks, Trump, you look weak. But from all the information I can gather, that the US isn't going to give anything. They're going to sell stuff. So actually, it's really well done to everyone else who's going to buy these off the Americans. Yes, the Americans will give permission, and they will help with targeting, which is super important, right? But actually, I don't think the US is going to part with anything freely. Right, then we're going to move on to the impact of these strikes, right? At a number of gas stations in the Belgorod region, it's now prohibited to fill jerry cans with gasoline. The problem is there, people are being told to get backup generators in case, because these power outages they're getting in Belgorod due to the power stations getting struck by the Ukrainians. Well, if you can't fill up jerry cans, then you can't fill up your generators. Like, hang on, you're prohibiting us from doing something that allows us to maintain power through power outages. So anyway, yeah, bit of a difficult one for the people of Belgorod. Diesel fuel is unavailable at stations in Zuya, Alushta, so that's Crimea, and Perevalne, as well as Atan and TES in Simferopol. Occupied Crimea. The shortages are likely linked to Feodosia oil depot strike burning for a third day, where tanks filled with diesel were destroyed. Now, this is key. So there have been a lot of, not criticisms, but observations that actually what Ukraine has successfully done with their strikes on the Russian hydrocarbon network is take out petrol. But what they really need to do is take out diesel, because that is what the army works on, and that's what industry works on, more likely. And that has certainly been affected in Crimea there. Now, Reuters reports that exports of oil products from Russia by sea in September decreased by 17.1% compared to August, to 7.58 million tons. That's a pretty precipitous drop in a single month there. That's essentially a sixth in 1 month. Unplanned shutdowns of a number of key refineries due to Ukrainian strikes reduced fuel exports and caused an increase in crude oil supplies. Total exports of oil products through the Baltic ports, a drop of 15.4% to 4.36 million tons, through ports of the Black and Azov Sea by 23.2% to 2.52 million tons. In the Far East, a decrease of 1.5% to 663 thousand tons. So not so much goes from the Far East. And from Arctic ports, an increase in 1.8% to 30.2 thousand tons. Again, not that many going from the Arctic ports, so it's not really 1.8% of 30,000 odd is nothing compared to, that's a 1.8% increase compared to 15.4% decrease in 4.36 million tons, right? So in total, yeah, it looks like they are struggling to export what they need to export. No reports says of this that attacks have disrupted operations at major sites, including Rosneft's Samara Group and Lukoil's Volgograd refinery, forcing Moscow to cut fuel exports across its ports. Okay, Chris, so Wiki has a thread in a sign of further financial trouble for the Russian government, which is facing increasing problems due to the economic strain of the war in Ukraine. Public servants civil servants here are said to have been unexpectedly told that they must pay all their taxes owed 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Telegram channel reports, quote, despite the legal deadline for paying property taxes for individuals being 1st of December 2025, Federal Tax Service employees at all levels are being quietly, but by order, forced to pay received tax demands by the end of this week and to provide scanned payment documents and tax calculations to their immediate supervisors for compliance monitoring. Moreover, there is no official explanation for this. Like the only hypothesis that makes any sense is that the Russian government is so desperate for money, they're demanding that their civil servants pay tax earlier than they should. There are reports that a number of other groups of public sector employees have also been ordered to pay their taxes urgently before the allotted deadline. Meanwhile, unofficially, there is talk of holes in the budget and the need to be urgently patched. Again, all these canaries in the coal mine. Large Russian enterprises, says Anton Gerashenko, are switching to 3 or 4 day work weeks. Russian media outlets report. So Uralvagonzavod, one of the world's leading manufacturers of armoured vehicles, including T-72 tanks, and Russia's largest producer of freight rail cars, is now operating below full capacity. Part of the workforce has been moved to a 4-day working week, allegedly due to falling demand for rolling stock. In reality, this effectively means a halt in the production of rail cars and civilian goods. Putin's officials are rushing to reassure the public, claiming that defense orders are keeping the situation under control. But behind this supposed versatility lies a simple truth. Factories are surviving from one military contract to the next, while the civilian sector remains empty, disguised as retraining employees for new professions. Rostelmash, Russia's flagship agricultural machinery producer, has been operating 3 days a week since August. This year, the company will manufacture only 2,700 harvesters, its worst result in 25 years. In the first 7 months of 2025, domestic shipments of agricultural machinery fell by 30% in monetary terms, and harvester sales dropped by 59%. The St. Petersburg tractor plant, producer of the Kirovets tractor, first sent its workers on extended leave and then introduced a shortened work week following. According to management, tractor sales in Russia have fallen by 20 to 25%. And there's more. At Kamaz, units operating below capacity have been on reduced schedule since August. Sales of trucks over 14 tons have plummeted to almost 60%. By almost 60%, even worse, and warehouses are filled with thousands of unsold vehicles. AstroVaz, which was expected to experience a renaissance after Western brands left the Russian market, so this is a car manufacturer, has found itself in the same trap despite protectionism and subsidies. Lada sales have fallen by nearly 25%. The plant, unable to withstand price competition from Chinese cars, now operates 4 days a week. And after the start of the fuel crisis triggered by drone strikes on oil refineries, it turned out that the Russians no longer even have enough fuel to drive their vehicles. Metallurgists and machine builders are also switching to flexible schedules. The Chelyabinsk electrometallurgical plant has introduced a 4-day week for 1,200 employees since September. The same applies to the motor and diesel plants in Yaroslavl and the Tikhvin Tikhvin railcar plant has also implemented a reduced schedule until the end of November. Companies explain these decisions as a way to preserve jobs, but in reality, the fewer working days that there are, the emptier people's wallets become. And then finally, as usual, the Kremlin pretends everything is going according to plan. Deputy Minister of Economic Development Zaselsky claims that workers are idle 30 to 40% of the time anyway. Therefore, he argues the goal is not to reduce working hours, but to make them more efficient. Putin's officials point to it's a doublespeak, of course, point to Western countries that have also experimented with shorter work weeks, though there it is done for citizens' well-being, not for statistical manipulation. Russia's 3 and 4 day work weeks have nothing to do with humanism. They're a direct consequence of the crisis in non-military sectors and the economy, and an attempt by the Russian authorities to conceal the scale of the problem. Mass layoffs would mean admitting an economic catastrophe, something the Kremlin is unwilling to do. Instead, authorities pressure enterprises to keep people formally employed while effectively sending them on short weeks or unpaid leave. But no amount of cover-up will make the problem disappear. The degradation of Russian industry cannot be stopped by a shorter work week. Sooner or later, the systemic collapse of entire sectors will become even more deafening. The deeper the militarization of the Russian economy, the faster Russia destroys its own future. Really important stuff there. And the analyst says Russia crucial products soar in price as major companies cut hours and pay. Russians are the top 5 of potato consumers, £300 a year compared to the US figure of £150. Prices this year have soared by 325%, and Russians have been turning to cheaper products like pasta, even though it's not especially popular. Average food inflation is officially 9.46%, but the reality is closer to 30%. Meanwhile, major companies from gas trucks who made $20,000 a year, the country's largest cement manufacturer, and others have cut workers' pay and reduced their working hours by 1 day a week to 4. It's a way to avoid permanent layoffs and is already alarmingly through most industries as they face falling sales and revenue. The latest 2026 budget has been heavily dissected in Russia as it already makes no sense. It targets official inflation at 4% when it's over 8%, and 2% increase in VAT is due to add a full 1% to the official figure, already largely regarded as around a third of the real figure. The Russian GAO equivalent is claiming that the deficit will be twice what's predicted at nearly 7 trillion rubles. The budget was also based on oil at $70 per barrel when Russia's trading oil at discounted rates close to $46 on average. The war budget stands at 38% of state expenditure, while health and education, economic investment and infrastructure have been all cut to accommodate it. No part of the budget adds up. It's a fairy tale of wishful thinking and fake figures, says the analyst. And then the Russian stock market is, as Jay and Kiev says, heading for Middle Earth here. It's gone down and down and down. Russian stock market, the MOEX, the Moscow Index, has been moving in the wrong direction fairly consistently. A couple of spikes upward recently, but still the trend is very, very clear. Now, Trump said the Russian economy is collapsing, and it seems to me they do not want to end the war. So I'll meet with Zelensky and hand them new weapons. The idea that they are going to hand some new weapons, but that Russia is really, really struggling. I mean, he does, however, still fawn about this good relationship.
Look, I'm very disappointed because Vladimir and I had a very good relationship. Probably still do.
Oh, beautiful.
I don't know why he continues with this war. This war has been so bad for him. He's going into 4 years of a war that he should have won that war in 1 week. He's now going to soon be into his 4th year. He's lost 1.5 million soldiers, probably close. Certainly in terms of wounded and no legs and no arms and all the things that happen in horrible wars. It's a horrible war. That's the biggest thing that's happened since World War II in terms of death. Meeting going. And look, I'm very disappointed because Vladimir
also talks in that part about the economy, Russia's economy being in real trouble. So he's getting information now. There was news yesterday, and I mentioned this in the live stream I did with Gareth last night, that there's a rumor, Jay and Kiev here saying no one knows why, but for the first time in 7.5 years, Iranian flagged ships have just turned on their AIS beacons all over the world. So the Iranian ships are now turned on their transponders. The oil market is taking it as a sign that Trump is about to cut a no sanctions deal with Iran. Needless to say, oil prices would be absolutely destroyed, sealing Putin's fate. So suddenly, if the US lifts sanctions on Iran, and we don't know if this is going to happen, but something weird's going on as the transponders are suddenly switched on. If suddenly Iranian oil goes more formally onto the international marketplace, then that will produce a glutton supply, and the oil price will absolutely tumble, and that will hammer the crap out of Russia. Now, the crew of a Ukrainian ship are coming home after being rescued when their tanker sank in the Black Sea. The cargo ship Eileen developed a hole 140 miles east of the Bulgarian coast resort of Varna on Sunday. Some say it was not seaworthy. A Turkish vessel rescued the crew from lifeboats there. So amazing, like happy ending, but I don't know quite what was wrong with the tanker and why it went down. Some controversy yesterday. I need to look into the details of this, but the mayor of Odessa was sacked, basically. Well, he's stripped of his citizenship. There was the scandal involving him having a Russian passport, and then supposedly the reaction to the flooding in Odessa was underwhelming and people is a bit controversial. He's always been a controversial mayor, but the question is whether that was the right thing for Zelensky to do. So I think there was some protest about the mayor, actually, that have taken place since he's been stripped of his citizenship. So I don't think he's particularly popular down in Odessa, but I don't know enough about this to cast my opinion. You're always a bit uncomfortable when the central government starts hoiking people out of elected positions. So that could be controversial, or it could be the right thing to do. Again, talk about reactions to the flooding and so on and so forth, and controversy to do with Russian citizenship and having a Russian passport. So yeah, one to look out for. I'll try and read through this article more carefully, and then just to let you know, there's this NATO meeting in Brussels at the moment, which is ahead of a Ramstein contact group meeting, Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting. So there could be lots of news coming out of Brussels today. Anyway, that's enough for me. Quite a bumper one today. Sorry it's been so long, but lots to talk about. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.